What's going on, everyone? This is Russell here, going to bring my thoughts on the Thursday night game between the Bengals and the Dolphins, specifically geared at taking down the Draftking Thursday night Millionaire Maker for their Showdown Captain mode. So let's get straight into it. Whenever I'm theory crafting for a game, I always like to find an entry point for my thoughts to kind of draw inferences and deductions from. So the first player I want to talk about is Jamar Chase. He's the most expensive player on the slate at $11,000. And he doesn't have the most ideal matchup. He's going against probably Xavier Howard, who will shadow him most likely, or at least he'll see a lot of him. And while it's kind of hard to predict his production, one thing I do think you'll be getting if you do roster him is an ownership discount. He's had a little slow start to the year. He's very expensive, and he doesn't have an ideal matchup, which I all think will drive his ownership down to lower than what it should be. While he's not my favorite play due to the matchup, you definitely cannot fade this man. I think it's definitely worth playing him because you will be getting him at an ownership discount. What I think is the more likely outcome, I think the Bengals have the weapons to spread the ball around more, especially against this Dolphins secondary who was destroyed by the Ravens in week 2 despite pulling out that victory. And also the Bengals offensive line has struggled not only to run the ball, but to also protect Joe Burrow. So I think there will be a lot of short passes. And let me talk about the guys I like aside from Jamar Chase on this Bengals offense. One guy I really like who will probably go under-owned as well is Hayden Hurst. He was limited week 3. He only played 39% of snaps, but he drew 8 and 7 targets over the first 2 weeks. And I'm anticipating a lot of short passes, so he can definitely match that target share, and he's always a threat in the red zone, so I love Hayden Hurst at his price. Another player who's kind of had a disappointing start to the year is Joe Mixon. Love Joe Mixon. The Bengals have struggled to run the ball. Mixon's only averaged 2.8 yards per carry, and the Dolphins have only allowed 3.5 yards per carry. However, I don't think any of that matters this game. I think he's going to be heavily targeted in the passing game as well. He had 9, 4, and 7 targets over the first 3 weeks, and especially in a game which could be high scoring and fast paced, I think he will be heavily involved. Oh, and currently the over-under sits at 47.5. I've also noticed the Bengals line implied points has crept up by 1.5, so people are starting to like the Bengals more and more. And I know they haven't looked great this year, but to be honest, I do agree with that sentiment. So honestly, aside from Chase, Hurst and Mixon are definitely my favorite plays in terms of skill position. So obviously we also have Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. We saw Boyd have a great game against the Jets last week. His production definitely varies a lot. He's obviously not the most preferred target. I definitely prefer Higgins this week. He's had 10 and 7 targets the past couple of weeks. And if we're expecting a lot of short throws, which I am, he's going to be a good possession target for Burrow to check down to or to look for first. And he's always reliable, especially when he's healthy. He's always getting banged up, especially like every week. But he is healthy. He's playing. So I specifically like those 3 skill position players, Hurst, Mixon, and Higgins, a bit more than Chase and Boyd. And I think breaking down the Dolphins side of the ball is a lot simpler. So obviously the 2 big names in the skill positions are Jamar Chase. Are Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So to put into perspective, they each have a target share of at least 28.7%. The next highest person being 7.9%. And in terms of the team's receiving yards, they've combined for 77.6% of their receiving yards, which is pretty ridiculous. So when you're rostering Dolphins players, you're really only considering Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Tua. Yes, you can get cute. There are other plays, especially in a large field tournament. I'll talk about those in a sec. But it really speaks to the amount of outcomes you can realistically expect. Especially with the Dolphins' backfield and time split between Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds. I know Edmonds scored 2 TDs last week, but they're not really having that much success running the ball in terms of yards per carry. And if you're going to take a chance on one of those 2 running backs, I'd actually prefer Mostert. He's cheaper and he's more explosive. He may not get the goal line carries, which is a negative, but he just always has the potential to break a screen or a run for 75 yard, like an 80-yard touchdown. So if you're going to take a chance on a Dolphins running back, I'd prefer Mostert, especially in a game where they it's going to be probably fast-paced, probably high-scoring. So he's definitely active in the receiving game as well. Another player. Oh, I forgot to mention injuries, but it looks like everyone's playing. We had Waddle and Tua questionable, but I think they're both playing. Cedric Wilson looks like he's playing too. So that brings up Cedric Wilson. He's been really banged up the first 2 weeks, but if he is playing, I do like him as a dart throw if you're making a bunch of lineups, because we've seen what he can do on the Cowboys when given some opportunity. He always is explosive when he gets the ball. So I don't know how healthy he is. So I don't love him, but I don't mind taking a dart throw on him. And that's really it. That's all I'm considering for the Dolphins. I know you have Mike Gesicki, but it's not a great fit. Yes, he always has the touchdown upside in the red zone. Not my favorite play, but I'm not really looking to play him. So those are my simple thoughts, and it all points to one conclusion in my mind. My favorite captain is Joe Burrow. I think I do like the Bengals in this game to put up points. I think the Dolphins will be pressuring him, but they also have weaknesses in their secondary. I think Jamar Chase will be subdued a little bit by Xavier Howard. So I think the Bengals are going to spread the ball around to all these other names I mentioned, Hayden Hurst, Joe Mixon, Higgins. So I don't think, I could be wrong, but this is my strategy. My favorite captain is Joe Burrow. I think the ball is spread around a lot. So I think a bunch of Bengals could be in the optimal lineup, but with Burrow as the optimal captain. So let's say you roster Burrow as captain, you can afford Hurst, Mixon, Higgins, and you can definitely still afford one of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I don't know how much you'll have left after that. I'd have to look at it. But that's my favorite strategy going into this game. And that's all I really have to say about this game. I wish you luck on the slate. Let's get it.